Welcome, everybody, to the Sentinels of Liberty podcast. Thank you for joining me this evening. It is a Thursday. It is the first day out of the week for the episodes, and hopefully you swing by on Saturday to see what I got cooking there. I'll be having Tom Edlum back on Saturday, so I hope you guys will come and check us out Saturday evening at 1700 Central Time. And that's pretty much all of the housekeeping that I have. Let's kind of get into what the topic tonight is going to be. Tonight, I did kind of have this initial plan of talking about war and weapons and, some of the things that are very contemporary. They're very in the moment. And I think this will kind of tie in fairly decent anyways. I kind of made a slight pivot away from what it is that I had originally done, because as I was sitting here thinking and kind of trying to figure out what I wanted to do, I felt that considering all of the things that are still going on, like Epstein and like a lot of the funding issues and the big beautiful bill, which is still very relevant, there's so much going on, and I couldn't help but to kind of step back and examine after listening to a few people that I really enjoy their podcasts, whether it's Tucker, Dave Smith, or even Scott Horton's show, which if you haven't watched any of those, I highly recommend you go check out their podcast. They have a lot of great information. And Tom Edlum, he just released an episode last night, and great content there. He does the blue collar breakdown over at Tom Edlum on his YouTube page. Highly recommend you go check him out. And I think he's a few other places, but I don't remember right off the top of my head. But go check him out. Go support him. He brings you a lot of the economic sides of things and a few other tidbits that I think you guys might find really interesting. But I digress. As I, was sitting here, this week and kind of trying to mull through and figure out what it is I wanted to do. Initially, it was about, entangling alliances, and it was about war, and it was about a few other things. But I couldn't help, as I was mentioning earlier, to kind of sit back and think as I was listening to some of these other people. And they're making a few different points that I thought were pretty interesting. And, as I'm sitting here, I started to notice a pattern that's not necessarily so recent, but has been going on for quite some time, even in before the Trump administration, so many other things. But I think because it's become so prevalent today because of the way that this administration had really positioned itself prior to coming into office. And that positioning really made it seem like they were going to be primed for being able to get certain things done. They certainly made mandates, they made promises, they made a lot of different things. And now the big thing I will caution everybody on is you never just take these people at their word. It doesn't matter how much you like them. We have to be very, very trepidatious about the things that they say. And that's with anybody, even the people that I like. And there's, I can say that's certainly the case even for me when it comes to Thomas Massey. We might agree on principle, but in the end of the day, the way that these things are carried out, in my opinion, could be done a little bit better, more effectively. I digress. You can't just consistently trust people in the way of just never questioning something. It comes with so many inherent issues that you end up getting down the road. And then it kind of leaves people just sitting there like, well, how did we get here? Which brings me to a situation that I think was not only somewhat avoidable, but I think very much foreseen. And it is this idea that when we look at all of the individuals, especially in the handling of the Epstein files and the case, and you have people that are saying, oh, the files never existed or whatever the case is. In the end of the day, we've seen this pattern, whether it's with Epstein, whether it's with Iran, whether it's with Ukraine, whether it's this or that. And it's this idea of this monopoly one on information, one on, in second, a monopoly on the truth. And this idea of like, oh, well, God forbid you try to actually investigate and you try to look into things or you try to find the truth in all of this chaos. And really what we end up getting is this kicking the can down the road mentality. Or in the end of the day, what we end up getting that's even worse than that is like, just forget about it. It's not a big deal. Just forget about it. Ignore it. It never happened. It doesn't matter. Certainly there's never going to be any consequences about it. And I find this troubling because this is you couple this with the overwhelming amount of hypocrisy that has occurred. And I can't help but to think to myself that these people really are deluded to the point to where they actually think that we're just going to let some of these things go. And it's very hard when you start to see in the cycle of all the information that we have. Epstein's always there. Thank goodness that people are constantly talking about Epstein because it shouldn't be let go. We have things that are going on as it pertains to still Iran. There's been a pause, but by all rights, there is no real conclusion to war with Iran. We're still technically at war with Iran. And that's not including or not forgetting about the weapon shipments over to Ukraine. That's not forgetting about the things that are still currently taking place in Gaza and all of these things. And that's hitting on so many, just a handful, I should say, of different issues. And anytime that people bring it up or question it or even have something that goes against that narrative or the narrative that's provided of like, oh, we're doing this for the right things, for freedom, for whatever the case is, anytime it's questioned, it's like, you don't ask those questions. Don't bring it up. Don't challenge the status quo. Don't challenge our authority. And if there's too much pushback, well, it becomes this thing to where it's just like, well, just forget it ever happened. We're just going to put this under the rug. We're going to forget it. Look, there is an essential component of resistance that is required in order not only for us to elicit or to get the truth, but in order for there to be some form of destruction to this monopoly that has been occurring for so many decades of the truth and of the information that comes with that truth and being able to find out what is really taking place. And moreover, this monopoly of control. Now, in my mind and in the way that I kind of have perceived recent events, I mean, my goodness, it's not only just this struggle. I think there's a serious struggle now for the control of narratives, the control of daily life, the control of finances, the control of the ability for people to go and to essentially live their life in the best manner that they see fit. And when you have this seemingly whimsical or callous disregard for this, for what am I trying to say? When you have people that just don't care, when they don't actually seem to care about their jobs or being able to fulfill the things that they say, and I'm not saying that I necessarily agree with this administration, quite frankly, on a huge amount of things. But in the end of the day, it's just like when you say this, you're going to stop the war, or you say that you're going to divest us from any wars whatsoever. That is one of those things that I think is actually important enough to follow through on. But instead, we don't have that. And instead, what we have is we're subsidizing other countries, or we're going to fight on behalf of other countries. And in the end of the day, furthermore, what we see with Ukraine and recently is now we want to tariff a country like Russia. And look, I mean, Tom Edlum and I had sat down and we had gone over different things regarding tariffs several episodes ago. And look, I mean, if you think the tariffs are going to solve something, or if you actually think the tariffs are going to be enough to put a country like Russia in the hurt locker, then I think that it's kind of delusional. There's a situation in which there seems to be a disconnect, and what we get instead is we get more hurt on us here as the American people. It makes things harder for us to buy. It makes things harder for us to be able to go through because we're sitting here and we're subsidizing all of these other things. And anytime that there's a question about it, it's like, oh, you're not patriotic, or oh, you must be advocating for this side, or you must be doing this. And it's the same type of rhetoric that we are seeing with something like the Epstein files, or the Epstein issue altogether, which is, if you question this, if you question what is going on, then you're not patriotic, or you're this stupid term, a panikin, which is the dumbest, most like 2-year-old childish term I've ever heard in my entire life. It's one of those things that is thrown out there that tries to distract from what the actual issue is. And quite frankly, it's this idea of trying to berate people for wanting and demanding answers, which is our right to ask of our government, is insane. And it's like, where, at what point does it end? At what point is there a sense of accountability? And I've kind of come to the conclusion that unless we start to take back that, and I think we have in some, to some degree, until we can start to do that more and more and more, and pour the gas on and start throwing aside these favored personalities, and really start to walk away from this, and divest from this, this cult-like personality issue that we seem to have, I don't think we're really going to get some of the things that we are. Now, that all being said, I think with recent events stemming from Iran, stemming from Ukraine, stemming from Epstein, stemming from even the big, beautiful bill, one of the dumbest names in the world, I think the pushback has been pretty noticeable, and it's been pretty noticeable on behalf of especially the people that have supported Trump, the administration, and all of that, because what we're starting to see is people are starting to figure it out. They are questioning the status quo, which is a very good thing. And I see this as a sense of essential resistance. It is an essential resistance, meaning we can't just sit here and ignore this anymore. It's becoming so egregious. It's becoming so big. It's becoming so out of control that even people who otherwise would have continued to go with the status quo are now coming around, and they're like, wait a minute, all of this stuff is wrong. We have to not stop asking the questions. We have to continue demanding the truth from the people that are in power. Now, we may never get some of those answers, but it does not mean that we don't continue to put that pressure on. And I think that this is ever more important the farther and farther down the road, because if we allow them to set the precedent of, well, they started asking questions, but then they just kind of died off. And so that's what we can expect. No, we have to set this precedent, as in, we are not going to roll over. We are not going to die off. We are not going to just turn over and take it. We are going to be studious. We're going to be aware. We're going to be, very invested in our role and our responsibility as part of this republic. It is for us to keep. And so we have to make sure that we're filling that role. We cannot allow these people to just get away with these. We can't allow them just to make these ridiculous excuses time and time and time and again. It doesn't work anymore. And all it's done is it's brought us down this path of ruin that we've been waiting in for so long, for generations. And it's finally hitting a point to where it's becoming so unbearable. As so many people have pointed out, I mean, we are in a situation to where, notwithstanding all the wars, the conflicts, the Epstein thing, I mean, you're getting a situation to a point to where you're having generations, younger generations, which are coming out of high school, they're coming out of college, and they're not even able to buy a house. They're barely able to afford rent. Most people are having a hard time finding reasonable work. And it really has to kind of evoke this question of, like, do we continue to accept this? Really? Do we allow them to gaslight us in this idea of that everything is okay? Nothing to see here. There's not a problem that is afoot whatsoever. There's not a situation that we should be aware of. It's, are we really going to allow them to gaslight us in this idea that, we're in the most prosperous time of our life? We're in the most prosperous period of our life, when in reality, we're starting to see things still go up in price, or if they went down, they're now coming back up again. It's absolutely ridiculous, and it's ludicrous that they continue to feed time and time and time and again that things are fine. There's nothing to see here. You don't have to worry about anything that's going on. You just have to ignore it. Trust the plan. It's not a big deal. And that to me is a big deal when they're sitting here working so hard. They're practically working overtime to get you to just avoid seeing the number of catastrophes that are taking place. And to me, that is when we need to be the most aware. We have to be the most involved. We have to continue to ask the questions that beg to be asked, because at this juncture, we're almost at a point to where we really can't afford not to. And so I think we really have to pursue an essential resistance at this point. We have to have a sense of rebelliousness, because the way that we are going now is only going to get significantly worse if we don't start to do something, whether that's locally or whether that's getting involved in the national level. And moreover, education wise, there's so many things that have taken place that I think would have just absolutely gotten the founders to roll in their graves. Things that were very obvious, things that they never would have conceived of even allowing, and that we have allowed. If you go back into the Declaration of Independence and you look at the 27 separate grievances as to our separation, you would find that we've pretty much, checked the box of virtually all of those grievances. How much are we willing to tolerate? And moreover, how much are we willing to take and put that forth onto our posterity, onto our children? We have to mount this essential resistance. And the good thing is we are seeing people that are not relenting. We are seeing people that are, mounting some type of a defensive, which I think is fantastic. And now we have to really work and try to take, or break rather, this monopoly on information, monopoly on the truth, and be able to get the answers that we're looking for, or at least do the damnedest that we can to try and do this, because there needs to be a sense of accountability. We can't let this stuff ride anymore. We really can't. And with all of that being said, there's we're I'm going to go over a couple things here real quick. I'm not going to harp on the Epstein thing really anymore for this particular episode, but there are a couple things that I think are very that are also very important. We're not only sending more weapons and funding to Ukraine, but on top of that, notwithstanding the Iran thing, I believe this year alone, we have bombed Somalia 51 times, I believe is what it is. How is that helping us? How is that even remotely going to get us into a better spot than we are now? They talk about, fixing the budget. They talk about staying out of wars. They talk about all of these different things. But I mean, we're just sitting here bombing the crap out of places like Somalia, out of places like Yemen, out of places, that most Americans there's probably, places that Americans don't even know. And they're just like, yeah, no, this is fine. This is fine because it's justified in whatever way it is that the government wants it to be. And to me, it's become so indefensible. And we, anytime that we go forth and we try to ask questions about this, it's defensive. It's this defensiveness or this deflection or whatever the case is. It's getting tiring. And I think, when we look at this current administration with how it's been, I mean, they're barely over 6 months at this point. And, it seems like it's just, one struggling step after another. And it's really showing you that if you don't go forward with a sense of trepidation, with people that you elect, if you don't always question, if you don't at least have a aura of suspicion or an aura of questioning or whatever the case is, that this is the expected outcome. We've seen the expected outcome. And the last thing they want you to do is to question it. They don't want you to question it whatsoever. So we really have to continue going, and we really have to maintain course. And it's not just for us today. It's for our posterity. It's for our future. It's for our children. Because if we don't set our disposition, if we don't set our tempo, if we don't set the way that we're going to conduct ourselves in the way that's going to position us in such a way that we can start to fight back, then it's going to be a losing endeavor. And I really don't want us to be in that situation. We've got to continue. We've really just got to continue staying the course. And, it's hard because there's so many. It's kind of hard doing this particular episode because there's so many things that I would like to try and shoot off on, but it's like each of these things really require almost their own episode. It is, I guess the crux of this whole thing is, it is insane to me, and it should signify to so many people that something is horribly wrong when all we've gotten, or seemingly so much of what we've gotten. I shouldn't say all, because all is a very generalized, and it has a sense of absolute. But so much of what we have gotten has been a situation in which we're gaslit into not questioning. We're gaslit into this idea of that everything is okay, and it's not. And I think it's okay to see that. I think it's okay to recognize it, because it's the way that we begin to heal. And for whatever reason, whether it's Trump, whether it is Bondi, whether it is Rubio or Ted Cruz or whoever it is, it seems like this has just become the same circus. I mean, it's really, really quite disheartening, honestly. Not that I overwhelmingly supported any of these people, but I think it's kind of disheartening in the fact that, like, we kind of knew what to expect, from so many other people. I think it's the idea that they were so vocal, which I think was one of the biggest red flags. They were so vocal on doing the right thing. And then when it came time to it, it's just an absolute utter mess. Insanity is really what it is. It's an absolute clown show. And I hope that as time goes on that we continue to, press, but I really do. I'm hopeful. I do want things to get better, and I do want to see us succeed as a country. But I think we really have to come to a recognition with things that the only way that that's going to happen is if we can at least start to admit that we have problems. And I just think that some people are unwilling to admit that. And, as many people have kind of posited, if all this stuff on Epstein comes out, it has the ability to destroy the status quo. It has the ability to destroy, the structures of power and so many of these other things. And it's at a certain point, sometimes you got to let it fail. So I know it wasn't the most miraculous episode tonight, but there's something to be said about how much resistance so many people in this administration are putting forth, in this realm of trying to gaslight the American people into this idea that there's inherently nothing wrong. There's nothing to see here. It's not as big of a problem as it seems to be. It wasn't a big war. or it wasn't really a war at all. It was just, a limited strike or whatever the case is. It's absolutely insane. Absolutely insane. Um, and it shouldn't be tolerated in any degree whatsoever. We have to be that essential resistance now, because if we don't become that resistance, if we don't continue to challenge things, and I do see the hope on the horizon, I think we are. But if for some reason we relent, I mean, man, it's going to be a lot darker than it is. And I think the hopeful side of it is, we do have a little bit of that light peeking through, and I think we can make the meaningful changes. And I will say that I don't know if many people saw like the Turning Point USA, uh, uh, event that was just done with Tucker and Dave Smith and so many other people. Um, but you're even starting to see the change in the younger generation to where what they are willing to tolerate and the types of mentalities that they have, and the um, even the way that they think is starting to change, and it's becoming so much more potent and so much more powerful. And I think that is so incredibly important to note, because they are going to be the future. At some point, they are the ones that are going to have to take the reins. So with that being said, it's just a few things that I hope everybody takes some time to think about. I know it was kind of a different episode, but it's just my perceptions, my point of view as to where I see how things are, it just based off of the information around me. And I think it's really is becoming quite telling. And I think it's really almost stupefying at the same time. So if you guys have anything, any comments you want to add to the conversation, or where do you think everything is going, feel free to let me know. Let me know where you think it's going to end up. Do you think it's actually going to be better? And I'd love to hear what you have to say. So with that being said, I know it wasn't probably the most elaborate episode, but I hope you guys were able to get something out of it. So have a great night, and we will see you on Saturday.